Hey everyone, Zankus here, and today we have my Commander deck tech. It's my first Commander deck, and it should be interesting. It's a lot of fun. I play it on X Mage a lot, and I really want to get this in paper, so see how that works out in real life. But before we continue, just remember, if you like my deck techs or my openings, just subscribe and comment. So let's jump into it. My commander is Nekusar, the Mindrazer. Two colors, a blue, black, and a red. You got a legendary zombie wizard, and he's a 2/4, but you never attack with him. We use him for his ability. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. And it's whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekusar, the Mindrazer, deals 1 damage to that player. So as you can imagine, we have a lot of I like to call it AoE damage. Just everyone gets damage. Let's start with the mana base. We'll start from the bottom over here. Shockland, Watery Grave, Temple of the False God. Add 2 mana to your mana pool. Play this ability only when you have 5 more lands. Temple of Malice. It's one of the scry lands. Temple of Deceit, another scry. It's a blue black. The other one was red black. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 swamps. A Sulphur Falls, Checkland from Innistrad. Steam Vents, one of the Shocklands. Reliquary Tower. You have no maximum hand size, which is nice because you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. There's a few cards in here with that ability, so you get that from a few different places, and it gives you 1 colorless. Rakdos Carnarium, Polluted Delta, got a little fetch there. Mountains, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mountains. We got an Is It Boilerworks. Now islands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 islands. We have Grixis Panorama. It's pay 1, tap, sacrifice Panorama, search for a basic island, swamp, or mountain, and then put it into play. Tapped. Then shuffle your library. Alright, Gruyere Reach Sanitarium. It's a legendary land. Well, it's only 1 in the deck, so it doesn't matter if it's legendary. Add 1 colorless, and tap, and pay 2. Each player draws a card, then discards a card. You'll understand why that is good later. Evolving Winds, some mana fixing. Drowned Catacombs, another check land. Dragon Skull Summit, check land. Crumbling Necropolis. It's a triple land. Comes to play tapped. Alright. Command Tower. Every commander deck usually has this. Add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Bojuka Bog comes into play tapped, and when Bojuka Bog enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So that's some graveyard hate, some free graveyard hate. Another fetch, a Bloodstained Mire, and finishing up with a Blood Crypt. 3rd shock. Let's start with the sorceries, I guess. We'll start with sorceries. Winds of Change. Love this card. Each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her library, then draws a new hand of as many cards he or she had before. Okay, so with your commander out, anything that causes everybody to draw cards is going to deal that much damage to that person. So you'll see a theme here. Windfall from Saga. Each player discards his or her hand and draws cards equal to the greatest number a player discarded this way. Remember, you have no maximum hand size, so it could be a lot of cards that you're making everybody draw, and they're discarding. Whispering Madness. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way, and has the Cipher ability. You then may exile the spell, encode it on a creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, its controller may cast a copy of encoded card without paying its mana cost. Yeah, you could. I mean, most of the games I played don't have the chance to encode it, but it's good. It's another way to get people to draw. Wheel of Fortune. It's the biggest money card in the deck. I think it's sitting at like $85. You could swap this out for something else if you don't want to pay that high cost. But it's just each player discards his hand, then draws 7 cards. Remember, every card you draw is 1 point of damage for every player. Wheel of Fate, it's a suspend Wheel of Fortune, so just some redundancy. Time Reversal, it is the more expensive time twister. So for 3, for 5, you time twist and then you exile it. Sky Scribing, for X and 2, each player draws X cards. 4 cast, 2 and a blue, reveal Sky Scribing from your hand. Each player draws a card. Activate this ability only once each turn, and only during your upkeep. Reforge the Soul. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards, and has a miracle cost for 1 in a red. So you can cast it for 2 if you draw it. It's the first card you draw. Prosperity. Each player draws X cards. Molten Psyche. Each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library, then draws that many cards. Has Metalcraft. If you control 3 or more artifacts, Molten Psyche deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that player has drawn this turn. There are a few artifacts in the deck, so you might be able to get this off. Incendiary Command. You're going to choose 2 for 5. It deals 4 damage to target player, deals 2 damage to each creature, destroys target non-basic land, and each player discards all the cards in her hand, then draws that many cards. So it's almost a board wipe with the 2 damage to each creature, and then you get to do the Wheel of Fortune effect. Demonic Tutor, to tutor up any card that you need. Dark Deal. Each player discards all the cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards -1. And then Blasphemous Act. It is Blasphemous Act costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature, so that's definitely a board wipe, and you can get it out for pretty cheap because you know, with 3 other players, they're gonna have some creatures out. You could probably cast this for 1 or 2 or 3, something like that. Next we have Jace Beleren. He's the Planeswalker card we have, and his +2 ability is each player draws a card. -1 is target player draws a card, and -10 target player puts the top 20 cards from his or her library into his or her graveyard. Yeah, we're just going to be using the +2 usually. Now we'll go over to the instance. I don't know why. Alright, so we'll just go here because I guess I don't have the art for Arcane Denial. Arcane Denial is an instant for 2 and counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you get to draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. It's a May ability, so you're basically getting a 2-cost counter. They're never going to take... Well, they might if they, it's the beginning of the game or something, but it's a counter with 2 damage. Counter spell. Counter target spell. There you go. It's easy as that. Crosis's Charm. Choose 1. Return target permanent to its owner's hand. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. And destroy target artifact. Alright, some removal. Cyclonic Rift. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Overload. Return If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So return each non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. So everything goes back to everybody's hand, except for the lands, obviously. And if there's tokens, they go back to nowhere. They're gone. Evacuation. Evacuation is a 5-cost return all creatures to their owner's hand. Again, if you're playing against a token generator, they just disappear, and everything else goes back to their hand. Slows down a little bit for you to set up your combos and stuff. Mystical Tutor. Play this at the end step of the player's turn before you, and you search for an instant or sorcery, put it on the top of your library, and then you draw it your draw step. Terminate. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. Easy removal spell. There you go. Wheel and deal. Any number of target opponents. Each discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. Draw a card. And then we have commit to memory. Put target spell or non-land permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. And the aftermath, each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into his or her library, then draws 7 cards. That's what you really want to use this for, but it's also a nice little bounce spell. We'll go over to the enchantments. Dictate of Kurfix. It's flash. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. You want people to be drawing as much as you can, just because we're going to be dealing damage every time they do. At the beginning of each player's end step, that player draws a card. If that player is your opponent and has 4 or more cards in hand, which they most of the time will because you're going to be making them draw, Fevered Visions deals 2 damage to him or her. Forced Fruition for 6. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player draws 7 cards. I've been playing this deck on X-Mage for a while now, and I have yet to cast this, and it just seems so much fun. Can't wait to get this out. Okay, here we go. Now we're gonna get to more damage cards. Liliana's Caress. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. With all these cards that make you discard and draw, you're getting it from both ends. Megrim. Old school card, love it. 3 mana. Whenever an opponent discards a card, Megrim deals 2 damage to that player. So you got like 2 of these every time you throw a card in the graveyard. It's great. Price of Knowledge. Whenever it's a 7 cost. Players have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Price of Knowledge deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in that player's hand. So you got Price of Knowledge and Forced Fruition. They play a couple spells, they got 20-something cards in their hand because they have to draw 7 cards each time. And then, you're taking a bunch of damage. It's great. Propaganda Tempest for 3. Each turn, each creature cannot attack unless its controller pays an additional 2 for that creature. That's just, slows the game down a little bit so they don't. Most of the time when they see the commander come out, they're like, oh no, we got to get rid of him because he's dealing damage to everybody. Raider's Wake from Ixalan. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. Raid. At the beginning of your end step, if you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. So if you get all 3 out, you're doing 6 damage every time somebody discards a card. Spiteful Visions. For 2 and black, red, you get an enchantment at the beginning of each player's draw step. That player draws a card. Whenever a player draws a card, Spiteful Vision deals a damage to that player. So now you got 1 extra card here, 1 extra card from your commander, and each of them is making them do damage. So at the beginning of every turn, you're doing at least 4 damage to your opponents. Underworld Dreams. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dream deals 1 damage to him or her. So you get this out. You get Spiteful Visions out. You're doing tons of damage to everybody. Waste Not. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie creature. token. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, add 2 black to your mana pool. And whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land card, draw a card. So this goes with all your discard and draw, discard and draw. They're discarding a bunch of cards. You're either creating zombies, you're getting mana back to play some more stuff, or you're just drawing more cards. Alright, so now we have the Locust Guard. Flying. Whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. You could pay for, draw a card, then discard a card. And when he dies, he goes back to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. But that first ability, you are making a ton of 1/1 blue-red insect creature tokens with flying. It's another win condition. You just create a bunch of these and swing over their heads. Alright, there's another one that I don't have the image for. There we go. Saison, Perverter of Truth. He's a 6/5 flying. I'm sorry, not flying. He's a 6/5 creature, legendary demon. For 5. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player loses 2 life and draws 2 cards. So as you can see, it's just draw, damage. We got everybody's favorite, Niv Mizzet, the Fire Mine. For 6, you're getting a flying legendary dragon. It's a 4/4. And whenever you draw a card, Niv Mizzet, the Fire Mine, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And you tap him, and you get to draw a card. Again, redundancy with this deck. It's just, you can't get this one out, you get this one out. And doing damage. And it's nice. Okay, Nightscape Familiar. For 2, you're getting a zombie. It's a 1/1 zombie. But blue spells and red spells you play, cost 1 less to play. So just a little mana helping there, or a little ramp or whatever. Magus of the Wheel coming up in Masters 25. He is the repeatable. No, I'm sorry, not repeatable. He is the creature version of Wheel of Fortune. So you throw him down for 3, you got a 3/3 body. Next turn, when Summoning Sickness is gone, you pay 2, sack him, and each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards. I like his flavor text. Fate is not as fixed as you might think. Alright. Kess, Dissident Mage. She is, I think she was like the commander for the Precon deck. But we got her in the deck, not as a commander. She's a flying 3/4. During each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way is put into the graveyard, this turn, exile it instead. So you just, Winds of Change. No, I'm sorry, Winds of Change goes back into your deck. Wheel of Fortune goes into your graveyard. Boom. Play Wheel of Fortune again. You got 2 of these cards out to deal 1 damage or so every time you draw. That's 7. 14 damage to everyone. 1 turn. Kezerket, Parasite for 1. And whenever an opponent draws a card, if you control a red permanent, you may have Kezerket, Parasite deal 1 damage to that player. Kami of the Crescent Moon. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws a card. Jace's Archivist. For 3, you get a 2/2 Vendelkin Wizard. Pay 1, tap it. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards that player discarded this way. So it's a reusable Dark Deal? No, that's -1. Where was it? Whatever it is, it's usable. Keep going every turn. Then we have Dragon Mage. It's a 7-cost Dragon Wizard. Flying. Whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. It's a 5/5 flyer, so you're getting 5 damage in, and you're Wheel of Fortuning. Okay, Archfiend of Infear from Amonkhet. It's flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a 1/1 counter, -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponent controls. So this is a nice board wipe there. You're discarding 7. They're getting 7 -1/-1 counters on them. We have an enchantment creature, Hag, Fate Unraveler. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Fate Unraveler deals 1 damage to that player. Again, lots and lots of redundancy with this deck. Master of the Feast, flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. That was supposed to be a drawback for playing a 3-cost 5/5 flyer, but with this deck you make it a positive. Alright, we got the creatures out of the way, instants, sorceries, and stuff. Now we go to artifacts. We got Chromatic Lantern. Let's do that. Yeah, there we go. Chromatic Lantern. You all your lands have add 1 mana of any color in your mana pool, and add 1 mana to your mana pool. Tap the lantern. Dimir Signet, Font of Mythos. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws 2 additional cards. Howling Mine, draw an additional card. Is it Signet? Obelisk of Grixis. These are all just mana fixing. Rakdos Signet, Soul Ring, Little Ramp, Swiftfoot Boots. Wow, I couldn't say that. Just giving your commander some hexproof so they don't target it. Teferi's Puzzle Box. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in his or her hand, the bottom of his or her library, and then draws that many cards. Temple Bell, tap it, everybody draws a card. Thought Vessel, no maximum hand size, and tap for colorless. Venser's Journal, you have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain 1 life for each card in your hand. Alright, and last but not least, an artifact creature, Psychosis Crawler. Psychosis Crawler's power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So his power toughness usually is a 7/7 because you're always dumping your hand, drawing 7 cards, dumping your hand, drawing 7 cards. So it could be 7, 8, 9, around that range. So let me know what you think of my commander deck, and comment down in the comments. Let me know what deck you want me to do next. If you want a budget deck, if you want a tier 1 deck, if you want modern, legacy, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'll put it together my way and have it here for you guys. So until next time, remember, comment, like, and subscribe.